time for us to check back in with the family history and stories of Opal Myers. If you missed any of the previous readings, just look in the description for a playlist, and you can also find a link in the description below of where to buy this wonderful, wonderful book. Papa's death. Papa lived from March 4th, 1879 to July 20th, 1950. Even though Papa had what they called heart dropsy, he was still the jolliest person that I had ever known. Everyone loved being around my Papa. At 71, he was still straight and tall. By looking at him, he was strong all right, but because of his 268 pounds and ailing health, he couldn't go long without sitting down and taking a break. His feet would swell, and during those spells, he could hardly breathe. He had a tooth that kept bothering him too. At first it didn't slow him down much, but as it kept getting worse, I wondered if it was abscessed. On Saturday, the 9th of July in 1950, even though Papa wasn't feeling well, he decided that going fishing up at the swimming hole would be much better than sitting around in the house moping. The people who lived up there, not too far from the fishing hole, said he complained of a toothache and was feeling kind of sick when he came by their place. They had him sit down and rest for a while. When he felt a little better, he got up and went on to the swimming hole. Later that day, Papa came home feeling so bad he didn't even clean the fish he had caught. Instead, he got out a pair of pliers and pulled his tooth and then went to bed. I happened to be up there at the time, so I cleaned the fish for him. The next day, he was dragging around, so on Monday, I called and scheduled him a doctor's appointment. The doctor gave him some medicine, maybe for infection, I don't know for sure. The following Saturday, Papa had a light stroke, and then he died on Thursday. The doctor said he died from the fluid that had built up around his heart and from the stroke, but I always believed that his tooth had something to do with his death. I speculated that maybe the tooth broke off when he pulled it and the part that was left caused an infection. Or maybe his tooth had been abscessed, and when he pulled it, the infection got into his bloodstream and poisoned him, and all that caused him to have the stroke. I don't know, of course, because I didn't go to medical school, but I just always believed that his tooth had something to do with him dying. Mama lived another 9 years before she died. She was almost 77. Mama's hair had never been a pretty gray like some elderly women I know. It was sort of yellowish gray. We really didn't know what to do to make gray hair pretty. The thought had never entered our minds to use special shampoos or rinses. Besides, we just didn't have the money for a bunch of fancy treatments and such, so we always used the cheapest of shampoos. When we saw her in the casket at the funeral home, it surprised us because her hair was as white as snow. Buying land. After Mrs. Click died in 1951, the Click place was owned by her son James. He lived in the cabin and took care of John, his epileptic brother, until he died in 1958. James also let his sister live there with her son and daughter. After James fell in love and married, he decided to sell the Click place and move his sister and her children to a house closer to where he and his wife lived. James came to me and told me, "I'll let you have this place for $1,000. You can pay me $200 a year until you pay it off." I made the last payment on the Click place in December of 1964. A few years before James offered to sell me his place, just after Carrie Alvin was born in May of 1947, the man who owned that little dirt floor cabin in the woods up there on the hill just below the pond told me he was ready to sell. He wanted $300 for 3 acres, and I thought he was holding me up. Why, I never! $100 an acre? There was no way that I was going to buy it at that price. He and his boys drank a lot, and sometimes they caused problems. One night there was this awful commotion going on outside down at the old McMahon place that I had bought from my brother-in-law. There his boys were, just a hooping and a hollering, trying to turn my outhouse over. My dogs had taken off down there and were barking and growling, fighting with their dogs, while those boys were as drunk as skunks. It's a wonder that they didn't slip and fall in all that mess and drown when they toppled my toilet. Then they would have smelled like they acted. After that, I said I'd give anything to have them out of here, so I went ahead and bought them out. It was well worth the $300. Consolidated Schools, 1955. When the county first started talking about consolidating the schools, they talked about how much better it would be for the children. At the public school in Del Rio, there would be separate classes for each grade, and each class would have their own certified teacher who would spend the entire day teaching them instead of having to share one teacher with 8 different grades. With these changes, the children would learn more. There would also be teachers who taught special classes like art, music, and physical education, and all the students' textbooks would be furnished by the county. The school would provide a cafeteria where the children would have hot lunches, an equipped playground, and a library with books the students could check out. There would be special education classes for those students who were not as bright as their classmates. All of that was good, but they were trying to do it too fast, and there were too many things that they did not take into consideration. A lot of families up here still did not know much about life outside of their community. They were different than the people who lived in town, even a town as little as Del Rio and only 7 miles away. The people were poor but did not realize just how poor they were. They couldn't buy clothes for their children like the town people did. Many of them had never used an indoor bathroom or seen running water or drank out of a water fountain before. It was not that I was totally against consolidation. I thought it could be a good thing, but it was happening too quickly for our country roots. The people back here were not ready for it. There were many children that I knew for sure would not stay in school long if they were forced to consolidate. We had put too much work into getting these children to where many of them could actually go on to high school. There were others who did not support consolidation, but they didn't say or do much about it. But I, for one, fought against it right up to the very last day. I had nearly begged the officials to wait another year, maybe 2, so we could better prepare the children for what it would be like to go to school outside the community. Or better yet, if they would just let us keep the one-room school, we would teach the children who would not adjust or refuse to attend school in Del Rio. The school's district simply could not understand my reasoning. Why wouldn't a child not want to attend a nice new school? Well, they finally told us that we could continue in our one-room school, but only if we met every single one of their conditions, which were maintain a school library of at least 500 books, build and maintain a playground that consisted of swings, a slide, and play areas, and have playground equipment like balls, bats, jump ropes, and other things for the children to play with. And we were to have a minimum of 20 students attending class on any given day. I'd always had way more than 20 children, so I didn't suspect that to be a problem at all. We worked hard to raise the money needed for the playground equipment. I contacted everyone I could think of and asked them to send library books. By the time school started, we had everything the school district required. I don't believe we would have had a problem with attendance either if I had been able to teach, but I was pregnant with Acorn, who was born that year in November. In my place, the school district assigned an older type lady that the children did not know or particularly care for. The children didn't understand what consolidation meant and were determined they wanted to go to school in Del Rio. They thought they wouldn't have to get up as early because they would be riding the bus instead of walking miles to school. They didn't think about having to get up before daylight and walking in all kinds of weather to where the bus picked them up. All they thought about was, we get to ride a bus to school. But they didn't even know how long that bus ride would be by the time they rode all over picking up all the other children. They had been told that the consolidated school would offer a tasty hot lunch just like we fixed for them here. They didn't count on having to pay for their lunch or that the food would be different than what they ate at home. Most of the families couldn't afford to pay for lunches, so if the children were to eat at all, they would have to bring a lunch from home. The other children made fun of them because of what they ate and their lack of manners. They didn't think about having to pay for all of their school supplies or not having clothes as nice as the other children and being made fun of. They didn't think at all about any of that. So on the day that the consolidated school started, the children could not resist the temptation of seeing that bus go by and not jumping on it. That day, there were only 2 students who came to school. I don't know what I would have done if the teacher the county assigned there hadn't needed her job so badly. Neither of us wanted the school to close, and we knew then that unless we came up with a solution soon, we would lose the school for sure. I knew that several of the students would not stay in the consolidated school very long without quitting, and I was determined to have a school that they could come back to, so I told her that I would take care of it. I got some of my last year's students who were starting the 9th grade to say that they would come to our school and pretend to be in the 7th and 8th grades. Then I had them each go and find 2 other younger-looking ones from the high school who were willing to be our students for a few days. The next morning, we had 15 from the high school, the 1st and 2nd graders from the day before, and 2 students who didn't want to go back to Del Rio. That made 19. We hoped the officials didn't check that day and that more students would come on Wednesday. That next day, we had 5 more children who didn't like Del Rio, so I told one of the older ones they could go back to the high school. Every day I let a few more older ones go back to their school, always keeping 1 more than we needed. That way, if something happened to one of the youngins, if they got sick or something, we would still have 20. We got all the way through the first week with no problems. But the next Monday, the school official was already at the school when the students arrived. Seeing him made me nervous, and I started worrying. Do they know that I've been using high school students? Will I have enough students here today? I still had 7 students who should have been going to the high school. I was counting on the 14 students we had on Friday to be back. That would make 21 children, and maybe there would be 1 or 2 more who didn't want to go to Del Rio. However, that morning we didn't have any new students. In fact, one of the students we had gained decided to go back to Del Rio. But we would still have our 20 and we should still be safe. When it was time for school to start, there was still 1 empty desk. It was a real nice day, and as it turned out, JL had decided to play out in the woods for a while before coming to school. We told the person inspecting us that we had 20 students, but he counted and said, "I've only counted 19 students. Where's the other one?" I guess he's late or maybe sick today. You know you have to have no less than 20 children every day in order to keep this school. As it turned out, they had already suspected that the missing high school students were coming to the school up here. He told all the students, "Pack up your things, and in the morning, everybody get on the bus and go to Del Rio. And the rest of you who should be going to the high school, we expect you to be back in your classroom." That was the end of the one-room schools up here. I had no way of getting the books and other things from the school for a while, and by the time I could, people had taken or destroyed everything that we had worked so hard to collect and buy. You could see books scattered all up and down the road and in the creek. I'd left all the dishes that I'd collected for cooking, and every bit of those was destroyed or taken off too. After the consolidation, I had to leave our house with Carrie and Selden and walk by lantern light all the way down to the old 15th where the bus would pick them up. One morning it was raining so hard and the wind was blowing something fierce. We didn't have an umbrella, but we were all wrapped up as best we could be and in our overshoes. Why, there I was, trying to carry that lantern in one hand and holding on to my walking stick with the other one, and those 2 little boys hanging on to me trying to walk down that road. When the bus driver arrived, he said that the storm was getting worse. It's coming up like a regular tornado. Going to be a real dangerous storm. It's too dangerous for you to walk back up the road there to your house. Trees are liable to fall and kill you. I know I sure wouldn't be going back that way. I don't know what to do now. I guess I could ride with you down yonder to the church and stand out on the steps there. At least I'd be under a roof. When I got off the bus down by the church, the lady who lived across the road saw me, and I stayed with her until the storm was over. Del Rio. I was right about the children not liking the consolidated school, and it wasn't long before a lot of them were skipping school. They hated it there. If I hadn't been pregnant, I would have gone to Del Rio with them and helped out just so they could adjust and have someone who understood them. Later, after Acorn was born, I did start teaching there. I was able to help a lot of the children, not just the ones from our community, but from other communities that were part of the consolidation too. There were many of them that had great difficulty fitting in and adjusting. Some of the children were scared to death to go to the bathroom. They had never used anything other than an outhouse before, and that flushing noise frightened them. This routine went on for years because the consolidation of schools did nothing to help the back mountain families change, so every year I would have some that needed special help adjusting to school. I remembered what it felt like to be away from home in a school where everything was different and strange, and I thought about Mrs. Henderson's letter to me and just how wise she had been. Think about all the things you are learning, and even though it is difficult, it will help you to understand how hard it is for people to accept change. Understand the fear of change. When you come back here to become a teacher, you will have to help your children accept change. By going through this time, you will be able to better help them. Even 4 and 5 years later, I still had children like that. There was this one little girl that would wet in her clothes every time she got upset, and that seemed to be just about all the time. At first, I didn't have panties or other clothes for little girls. Acorn was, I guess, 5 or 6, so I would take 2 or 3 of his little underpants that he had outgrown to school and hide them so the other children couldn't find them. Some of the teachers fussed about the little open place in the pants, so I got out my sewing machine and sewed them all up. Then I had something for that little girl to wear, and I would take her wet things home and wash them. One day a man brought his boy to the school and wanted to talk to me. "Miss Opal, our boy here has trouble learning things. They told me you've taught older children how to read and write." I did when I taught in the one-room schools. I don't teach the special education children here. I have a regular class, but they do have classes like that. "No, Jimmy's the age of your students, and I want him to go to your room and be taught by you." I knew the father was afraid of how his boy might be treated. I told him the special education teacher was real nice, but he wouldn't hear of it, so I agreed to take Jimmy if it was all right with the principal. There's another problem with Jimmy. He hasn't learned to use the bathroom in time. That won't be any problem. My lands, if that's all that's wrong with Jimmy, I can teach him that. You just send Jimmy some extra clothes. Well, Jimmy never did have to use those extra clothes. I told all the boys, anytime you have to go to the bathroom, take Jimmy. He'll be glad enough to go with you. Just say, "Let's go, Jimmy," and take him along. Jimmy did real fine. Why, he wasn't a bit of trouble, and even though he was a slow learner, he learned a lot. When Jimmy got older, he was able to learn how to drive a car and took care of his grandmother. The wonderful Opal strikes again, right? She's just amazing, amazing. Another peek into the amazing Opal is how I've started thinking of it. So this part starts out with her papa dying and Opal talking about how he had that terrible tooth, and she thought it was all connected, maybe the toothache, if it was abscessed and then infection. I know your teeth and your heart are connected. Granny, because she's always had heart trouble, she has a heart murmur from when, that's how it started out, from having rheumatic fever when she was a girl. And then eventually she had to have a valve replacement. But if she's going to go to the dentist, like say for a fill-in or something like that, they always make her take antibiotics before she ever has any work done. So maybe Opal was right, but really sad that in those days there wasn't anything else that could be done. And you know, thinking about, I guess maybe I'm thinking about it because I've dealt with people with heart trouble my whole life. Granny's, that kind of cured Granny, but Pap with his blockages and different things. and thinking of the part where she said his feet would swell and then he'd sometimes get to where he couldn't breathe, that smothering feeling, that's just so hard to go through. So that's really, really a sad part there, and sad that in those days there just wasn't enough medical help to really, they didn't really fully understand how to help people like that. So then she goes on to talk about her mama lived quite a bit longer after Papa died, and it's interesting that she talks about her white hair and how it wasn't that pretty white color until she died. Now, I don't know if Opal means suddenly something miraculous happened and her hair turned white, or if she means maybe the funeral home knew how to fix it. They knew how to fix her hair. I'm not sure. And then Opal talks, she buys more land. She's talking about buying land and how she bought the Click place, but then how the other people that was living there, the sons and the father, how they were just so wild that she finally did pay them the $100 an acre. That's almost unbelievable, isn't it? For that time, of course, today we know land costs much, much, much more than that. But at that time, compared to what she was paying for the other pieces of land, that was, like she said, I believe they were holding me up. That was kind of highway robbery, I guess. But they were so aggravating that she finally decided it'd be worth it just to have you gone, just to have you out of here. So that's interesting. And then the rest of it's really just about Opal, how wonderful that she was for the children, and all of them, not just those individuals that she helped, but how she knew she wasn't against, like she says, she wasn't against consolidation, but she just wanted to be able to help those kids adjust before they went on to the school. And she knew all of the things, like it's not just that you're going to get to ride the bus, you're still going to have to get up early, and a lot of the time you're going to have to be walking to where you get on the bus in the dark, in the cold, in the rain, and all that. And you're going to be on that bus for a long time as it drives around and picks up other students. In a rural area, I can really identify with that. Some of the places, some of our schools in our area, I could drive to fairly quickly, depending on which one it was, driving by car, if I just go straight from here to straight there. But then when you think about a bus that has to stop and pick up this one, go here and pick up that one, back out, maybe go up this road, then come back out, before you know it, even a bus ride in our area can be over an hour long just really quickly because of the distance of the schools and living up in the hollers and the coves and things like that. So Opal was thinking about all that. She was also thinking about how those town kids would have nicer clothes, and the kids that she was used to teaching would probably likely get made fun of. And then there was the aspect of they didn't really understand about bathrooms, and then that's another point of contention. They're not going to like that, and they're going to be made fun of for that. And then even the food, not only would it be different food than they were used to, they're going to have to pay for it, and they can't pay for it. So there was all those things that Opal knew about. So she just wanted to work on those problems and then let them go to Del Rio. But it was not to be. She worked so hard. I can just imagine her gathering those books and getting the money for the playground equipment and all those things, and then sneakily working to make sure they had 20 students, getting some of them to come back and stay. And in Opal's mind, she just thought, well, just give me time. I know some of those students are going to come back here to stay, but we got to stay open till they do, once they realize Del Rio's not what they thought it was going to be. So Opal really, really worked hard, and then it just didn't work out. Sad that she noticed the books and stuff outside, that people had just tore up stuff. That's terrible. I mean, even if they should have took them home with them and used them, or took them back to Opal. That's what somebody should have done, and she would have made sure they were used. But that's sad. And sad that they just weren't able to stop the consolidation. Or not really, she wasn't really trying to stop it. She was just trying to, I guess, slowly move into it, is what it was, so that the children from those back mountain areas could become accustomed to those different ways of learning and the different ways of living, really, just that their lives were so different. So she was trying to do that. And then once it was consolidated and she had her child there, she was pregnant, and then eventually she did go back to work, and she was able to help those type of students. And of course she shares another story of a little girl that needed extra help, and how she took clothes and and just made all that work. And it's interesting, when Jimmy's father, he wants her to be the teacher, probably because he's heard all about Opal, because of, you know, all the stories, and he knew her personally, it says too, so he knew that Opal would make sure that Jimmy was took care of. But it is interesting when he tells her about the bathroom part. Opal's like, if that's the, you know, because you think about it, there's probably other kids, but there's 2 little girls. One was at one of the little small one-room schools. You remember that, how she had the little girl, she'd change her clothes and even get the older girls to give her a bath, like wash her off and put her on her clothes and then put the dirty clothes back on her. So she had already done all kinds of things that we would think of today, like, you know, kind of uncomfortable or unsanitary or whatever. She had already helped take care of all kinds of stuff like that, so that didn't faze Opal a bit, just not one bit. She's like, I'll handle that. And then Opal's so smart, she handled it in such a way that Jimmy never had an accident. He never needed those clothes. She just knew, she just said, every time one of you boys go, take Jimmy with you. So she taught Jimmy about going to the bathroom, and taught him a lot of other things, I know too. And then how wonderful, says he went on to learn how to drive a car and to take care of his grandmother, which was what a blessing for the grandmother and for Jimmy too, I'm sure. But then for the rest of their family, what a blessing that he just kind of stepped in and took over and was able to do that, maybe while they were all busy with their families or working or whatever. Mostly this part, though, to me, is just another example of the wonderfulness of Opal. What a dear lady she was. What a wonderful, wonderful, good-hearted person. Good somebody, as we would say here. She was a good somebody. She sure was. So I hope you enjoyed this part today. Please leave a comment and tell me what jumped out at you. And I hope you'll drop back by next week so we can see what happens next. We're getting closer to the end. We've got about that much of the book left. So getting closer to the end, but we will continue reading it and enjoying it until we get there. So do drop back by next Friday.